Debt-Free in 30, where every week we take 30 minutes and get practical advice from industry experts about personal finance and living debt-free. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
It's obvious that debt is debt, right? A credit card is a credit card, regardless if you are tall or short, old or young, male or female. That's true, but today on Debt-Free in 30, we're going to look at new data that shows that women face different debt issues than men. We've just released a new study that explores why women are filing bankruptcy in higher numbers. Back in March, when we recorded our second Butter Tarts podcast, we gave an advance look at the data to Gail Vaz-Oxlade and Kerry K, and after we recorded that podcast, we kept the microphones running to get their thoughts on this issue. The study was prepared by my wife, Sharon Hoyes, who is a chartered accountant and also the Hoyes Michaelis Chief Information Officer. So since she is familiar with the numbers, let me turn the podcast over to her to set the stage with some numbers.
Okay, we've been looking at insolvency data for trends since 2007. One aspect we look at is gender. Historically, men are more likely to file insolvency than women. In fact, between 2007 and 2012, men filed between 56 and 58% of all insolvencies. However, we've seen a big shift in this trend beginning about 5 years ago. Since 2012, the percentage of insolvencies filed by women has risen each and every year. By 2017, it was almost 50-50. 48% of insolvencies were filed by women, 52% by male debtors. It's not that women are suddenly using more debt. In fact, women debtors owe less money than male debtors when they go bankrupt. What we know is that the profile of our average female client is different than our male clients. 2/3 of women debtors are either single or divorced. They're struggling to get by on a single income. Women earn 7% less than male debtors. They are 3 times more likely to be a single parent than a male debtor. Women are twice as likely to have student debt. And 15% are seniors living on a fixed income. But those are numbers. That's what our average female client looks like. The big question is why? Why are women increasingly finding themselves in trouble with debt? Gail, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so about 1 million years ago, I wrote a book called A Woman of Independent Means. And when HarperCollins republished it, they republished it as It's Your Money. But really, it was about a woman of independent means. That's what the whole gist was. And I wrote a book specifically for women because women's circumstances are completely different from men. So, for instance, I said things like, women get sick and men die. Men die, women get sick, which means that we stick around. And there couldn't be anything worse than being old, sick, and then adding poor to the equation. Okay, but that's what we do to ourselves. We bear virtually all the responsibility for caregiving, be it our children or our elders. That's always been our job. And when we divorce, a man's standard of living actually goes up while a woman's standard of living goes down. So because there are all these very specific things that happen to women, leaving the workforce to have children, taking time off to take care of an aging parent, because there are all these things, we need a different approach to money. We need to be far more vigilant about what we're doing because we're going to have to live on whatever we save for a lot longer time. Me, I'm just going to, go out into the back 40 and have somebody shoot me when my money runs out.
So yes, we have to be vigilant. Okay, let's say I become a single mom. What should I be prioritizing? Why am I not prioritizing my future over today?
So I believe part of it is that when we go through divorce and become single parents, or if we just become single parents, we are in no way prepared for what that actually is. I remember how long I thought about having kids before I had kids. And I watched people pop kids out at a wicked clip and then complain about daycare costs, like they didn't think that was going to be part of the equation. What? You had one child, you knew what daycare cost was. If you couldn't afford it, why'd you have a second one? Okay? But we take this as if it's our due. Everything is our due. We are entitled to have as many children as we want. We're entitled to live in a nice big house. We're entitled to drive relatively new cars. And these things that are due become due and payable.
You were talking earlier, about the daycare costs, though. I mean, if you've become recently divorced, and so now obviously you have to go, say, out and find a full-time job because you're now living on your own, you're living on your own income. Now all of a sudden you're caught in a daycare trap, almost.
Yeah, well, I was just looking at some of the Stats Can information, and the average age for women getting divorced is around 41 years old, and it's 44 for men. So if you're looking at having kids later in life, like, say, 35 or in that ballpark, that's when I became a parent. If you get divorced at 41, you may just have finished your stint with childcare at home. And now you're looking at getting back into the workplace, and maybe you need daycare or before and after care for your kids. That's a really tumultuous time, especially considering there's other factors at play as well. Women face a pay equity gap. We make about 87 cents on the dollar to men. So all these things clip together. We spend less time in the workforce when we have kids. We earn less right out of school because we're paid less. Then we take time off for kids, and if we get divorced, all these factors come into play. At the end of the day, we live longer than men, so we live about 3 to 4 years longer. And if you look at the numbers in retirement, so if women aged 65, if you retire at 65, and men retire at 65, we live longer. So women have 22 years in retirement, men have 19. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you do the math, that's a 15% increase in retirement time that we have, that we need to make that less money that we've accumulated throughout our life last. So that's why maybe you're seeing women in their senior years file for bankruptcy, because there just wasn't the money earlier on.
So are we making the necessary decisions then when we're in our 30s, when we're in our 40s, to say, I need to be prepared? I kind of have, as nurturers, we want to take care of our kids. As nurturers, we take care of everybody else. So do we need to say, okay, I need to change that mindset? Since I'm on my own, I need to take care of myself. Because if you don't, you actually are, in a way, not helping your children out long-term either, if you're not taking care of yourself.
So one of the things that I find so interesting about the woman dilemma is this whole idea that we're so focused on caregiving, okay? Because we take care of our children, we take care of our elders and so on, and ultimately we pay the price because we don't take care of ourselves properly. The reality is that if you are earning less than your male counterpart, if you are having your income interrupted on a regular basis, be it because you're taking care of kids or whatever, somebody's falls sick, you have to run and take care of that problem. If you've just been through a divorce, you don't have the wherewithal to make good decisions, okay? You are running from crisis to crisis in terms of just coping with life. And that's one of the reasons why you see women just get exhausted and just dissolve, because there's just no way to deal with all that pressure. I mean, Kerry, has talked about in the past the significance of stress. Well, go ahead and become a single mom and see how stressful life is. Go ahead and have a second baby and have your partner leave. And now you're there with 2 kids. For most of my life, I said I was never going to have children. And when people ask me why, I said, because I have barely enough energy to take care of myself. How would I take care of a child as well? And then I met a man who said it was the best thing in the world, and he talked me into having kids. And it was fabulous. It was absolutely fabulous. But when we divorced, and then I had to spend time away from my children because shared custody, heart-wrenching. Everything in life comes with a punch in the nose or a pat on the back. And there are more punches in the nose than pat on the backs for women.
Mm-hmm. And advocating, when I worked in computer science and found out I made significantly less than my male counterparts, there's a different system in place for women, because if you go in and ask for pay equity, you're seen as, greedy, money grubbing, selfish. And so it's
you're bigger than your boots. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, how dare you ask for this money?
You're lucky to have a job.
Yeah, and you feel lucky to have a job, right? Because, not many women are in computer science. Look around the room, who's there? It's not a lot of chicks. No. So it's like, well, So you try to advocate for yourself, and it doesn't matter the industry. I've worked in media too, and I've stood on an X on a set where the guy made 10 grand and I made 300. And I thought I was doing well because I negotiated up from 100. So if things aren't transparent and you can have that conversation with your employer and ask for more, it doesn't mean you're going to get it. So, I mean, it's really challenging because it's like you want to earn your equal pay, but there's just sometimes it just doesn't come to you.
No, and sometimes you are in a situation where I can't afford to lose this job.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Exactly.
I'm raising my children,
Absolutely.
I need that money.
That's a huge part of it. And so, if you are the one that's being counted on. So many years ago, when my last husband and I first got together, he lost his job. His company went into CCAA, and he was the last guy in, so he was the first guy out. And my face started to twitch. Okay? And he said to me, is this pretty stressful for you? It was the first time I had an inkling of what it was like to be the male breadwinner of the family and the weight that carried. Okay? And I always swore that I would never, ever be dependent again. I would never be dependent because I was never going to put myself in a position where other people had the power to make my life something I didn't want it to be. One of the things that I have been a big proponent of is his and her accounts. All the time I hear from women, we're a partnership, blah, blah, blah. We love each other. That doesn't show much trust, blah, 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 blah. And I think, baby, let me tell you something. If you end up getting divorced, if your husband ends up getting smashed to pieces on the highway, you will be so glad you have money in your own name. I don't understand why that is a problem. But, as women, we're perfectly happy to defer to the old system where we just pool all our money. So women have said to me, well, what about if you're a stay-at-home mom? I said, that's easy. You pay all the bills and whatever gets left over gets split 50-50 between the two of you. I mean, that's the agreement you made when you stayed home, right?
Yeah.
But women won't do that. They won't demand what they need in order to be safe.
Well, and even more, one of the other issues that we see is co-signing on your spouse's debt.
Oh,
so your
Lord.
your spouse comes into the marriage with student loans, right?
Lord.
His, hers, and ours, right? Like, no. Okay, you can make a family plan to pay it off, but that doesn't mean you have to sign on the dotted line.
Oh my gosh, I say this to people all the time. Like, it's not your debt, don't take it on.
No.
But I have a better credit history, so I'll get a better interest rate. Baby, if he created this mess for himself, you let him clean it up as a testament to how much he loves you. If he doesn't love you enough to clean it up, don't marry him. Feel free to sleep with him all you want. Screw his brains out, but do not marry him.
There's the quote for the show right there. So we've got in the room Alison Petrie, who's our trustee here in Oshawa, because that's where we're recording this today. Have you seen what Gail is describing, Alison?
I've seen it many times over. I also wanted to talk about divorce agreements because the man works for a large corporation or a government agency and has a great big registered pension plan, and there's all this co-signed debt. And in the divorce agreement, he says, if you don't touch my pension, I promise to pay off all the debt. And then after it's all signed, he goes bankrupt and she pays off the co-signed debt, and she didn't get an asset in exchange for doing that.
Yeah, which is back to Gail's point that it is, if you sign for it, it's yours.
Absolutely.
That's how it works.
And more importantly, if you didn't sign for it, it is not yours. So
That's
don't
right.
believe the bank when they call you up and say,
I
we are
want to
going to try
crush
and
you.
get...
Yep.
The answer to that is, please do go and take a break.
Yeah, and that's something people don't get. Just because you're married does not mean you inherit the other person's debt. So it's true when you get divorced, the property gets split, whether your name's on the house or not. But the actual debt is whatever you signed for. It has nothing to do with who you're married to.
Absolutely. And so as women, if we want to protect ourselves, and you know what? Women, if you don't want to do this for yourself, If you don't think you're worth it, that's fine. I get that. You have crappy self-esteem and you don't think you're worth it. Aren't your children worth it? Because if you aren't protecting yourself, your children are also going to suffer.
Now, you just mentioned the word crappy self-esteem, and earlier on you used the word entitled, I think, in something you were saying. So is this a theme you see consistently?
I do see this theme consistently, perhaps because I did the television show for so long, and so these were the people I was very often exposed to. This sense of, I want what she has. Whatever she has, I want it. I can't tell you the number of girls that were walking around with $2,500, $5,000, $12,000 purses that had nothing. And when I went to take those purses away from them, they sat on the floor and they cried.
It's their status you took.
Totally.
It was
the
their
name on it.
Their self-esteem was in their
Not
bag.
even their name. That's it.
Yeah.
And so if you are wrapping yourself up in stuff, if that's your self-esteem, if you aren't accomplishing something and feeling good about what you're accomplishing, I mean, just look at your babies. That's what you're accomplishing. That's what you should be focusing on. Never mind all this rubbish with, who has what. That sense of entitlement leads us to do things that are totally counter to our long-term financial health. And if we don't also demand to be paid fairly, and we don't also demand that when you say to me as a woman, your job's so important, you're raising children, then pay me for that. Mm-hmm. If you think that is such an important job, show me the money.
When I was growing up, my mom, I grew up in a very, my mom she controlled the money in the house, and so when I was young, she showed me, just in case if she were to get injured or hurt in an accident, I knew where the wills were. I knew where her bank accounts were. I knew at what banks they were at. I would go with her to the bank. I watched her pay bills. I watched her, manage things. And so when she raised me, I managed my own bank stuff as well. And so I think if it doesn't start, now when you're in your 20s, or if you're in your early ages, I think that's where I credit, my ability to see in the future, because I saw my mom go through it. And it's really tough. She basically disaster-proofed her life before she had kids, and then taught her daughters how to deal with the situation if it went poorly.
Yes.
So because I saw all these things in place to prevent her daughters from being destitute, if both parents were taken out, basically, I've done that with my own life. So we have life insurance, we have emergency savings, we have, retirement savings. Just because I know bad stuff happens to good people all the time, and you need to account for the future as well as the present. But I mean, this is all well and good, but I had this planned out before I got married. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like daughters and young women, when they go into school and they take on this debt, they need to have a plan before they graduate or before they go to school, so that they're not got this burden right out of school, because it can snowball from there.
But everybody needs to do this. I mean, one of the things that the media used to ask me a lot was, so is there a difference between how men and women manage money? And I would say, nope. There are just as many stupid men as there are stupid women. And it doesn't matter what their age is. There are just as many stupid old people as there are stupid young people. And it doesn't matter what their socioeconomic background is. There are just as many stupid rich people as there are stupid poor people. It boils down to, how determined are you to be the master of your own life? If you are determined to be the master of your life, then you will assume a certain amount of discipline and you will do some planning. And if you just are quite happy to be the dead leaf being carried along on the little river, then you should not be surprised when you get stuck down under the water and you drown.
So you're a big believer in self-determination then?
Absolutely. I am. I remember as a child, my mother saying to me, you can have anything you want if you're prepared to work hard enough for it. And I raised my children with the mantra, you can have anything, you can have everything you want, you just can't have it all at the same time. So you have to be willing to choose. Sometimes you will get one thing and other times you'll get another thing. Over your life you will have it all, but you can't have it all in one place.
So how do you reconcile that then with some of the stories Kerry's just told then, that I guess the question I'm asking is, where on the spectrum, am I? Am I completely responsible for everything, or am I not responsible for anything? If I'm driving to work today and someone rear ends me, okay, well, that wasn't my fault.
No, but you have insurance.
So I have to mitigate that.
What you have to do is you have to recognize that crap happens. I mean, that's why we say to people, have a big fat emergency fund. It's why we say to people, have enough and the right kind of insurance. And I mean, as soon as I open my mouth and say the word insurance, I have the whole life guys diving on top of my head one side and the term guys diving on my head on the other side.
They're
and
the worst, aren't they?
And I say, neither one of you is right. Let's ask the customer what the customer needs, okay? And that's what it boils down to. But if you haven't taken the time, and I just want to point out that I do not have a university degree, okay? I did not come to personal finance from accounting or I came to it from training. And the way I did that was I worked for a consulting company and we won a contract. I won the contract to write training material to teach bank personnel their own products and services. And they literally shipped me their product brochures, their backroom stuff, their technical manuals, and I waded through it and created curriculum. And that's how I got my financial education. In other words, I taught myself money. If I can teach myself money, anybody can teach themselves money. Okay, this is not a hard thing to do. There are some aspects that are complicated. Estate planning is a little complicated. Insurance is a little complicated. But overall, investing is a little complicated. Overall, the nuts and bolts of money management is grade 5 math.
And applying some common sense.
Common sense, but common sense is rare. I listen to the way some people talk about... So here's a story. I'm doing a workshop and I've taken my daughter Alex along to help me because we're going to go from station to station as people work through their budgets and so on. And Alex sits down with a woman who hasn't got her budget to balance. And she has a category in there for cigarettes. And Alex says, you have to take the cigarettes out. And the woman says, I need those cigarettes. And Alex says, don't let my mother hear you say that. Okay? Because... what people perceive to be needs is way out of whack, okay? Needs are things that keep body and soul together. If you don't fulfill the need, you'll die. So you have to have shelter, but you don't have to have expensive shelter. And you have to eat, but you don't have to eat steak. And you have to keep yourself clean, but you don't have to go to, some fancy store to buy your soap. What we consider to be needs is really... probably 10% need and 90% want.
So what then is the solution then? So we've kind of gone through some of the big numbers. Were there any other points that you wanted to...
Well, I think maybe that you touched a bit on it, on university and the pay gap is, so we know 60% of more than 60% of graduates are women. Women are going to university.
Yes.
But we're not earning the income.
No.
Are we... If you had a young person going into university today, how would you tell them to choose?
So first of all, we're not earning the income based on all women, but for new graduates, they're earning 95 cents on the dollar, on the male dollar. So they're doing significantly better than we did when we graduated.
Except for they're heavily, when you look at where they're going to university, women are heavily weighted to the humanities, which are not paying as well. They're less weighted to the maths and the sciences.
The STEMs, yes.
Should they be thinking about that, or should they be saying, nope, I'm just going to go?
I don't know about you, but I think that when you follow your bliss, you sort of have to follow the things that you are most interested in. And you couldn't shove me into a science program because I would be no good at it. Mm-hmm. I am a writer, so I'm a humanities person, okay? I think more importantly, guidance counselors have misled young high school graduates tremendously by continuing to issue the statement, if you go to university, right, you'll make more money than if you don't go to university, because that's not necessarily true. So I met a young man very recently. He's 21 years old, and he's finished his plumbing apprenticeship.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. He's making bags of money at 21 years old, and he's done.
Yeah.
Okay? What we've done, and I've said to my daughter, I wish you would go into a trade. I wish you would go into a trade.
Well, the government just announced programs to get more women in trades. So there
That's
you go,
good.
because of the gendered budget that came out.
You mean by that lovely man that is in Ottawa? Everybody is... No, we won't. I don't understand why they hate him so much. I just don't get it. Because he's doing so many good things. And compared to what we had before, anyway. The point is that we go into courses without looking at what the outcome will be at the end.
Yeah.
The best example of that is teachers. There are gobs of kids that are still going through university to become teachers.
No jobs.
They actually change the course from a 1-year course to a 2-year course so they can take more of your money.
Yep.
And when you graduate, you still won't get a job because none of the other teachers are retiring. There are no jobs. Unless you have French, you're screwed. Okay? So all those people that are going out to become teachers, and to a large extent, parents encourage this. Blue-collar parents encourage their children to go to university to become white-collar workers when they could be much better off remaining blue-collar workers and being able to support their families.
Okay, so there's something else. So I did computer science and I worked in STEM. So I spent 12 years working in computers. And as, a girl in a very male-dominated environment, I noticed the women drop off pretty quickly. So it's almost like we had kids and then we didn't go back to work. And I wondered what was happening. When I was in university, I started a summer camp for programming for both boys and girls. And I noticed very quickly that if we only sent the boys to the high schools or to the junior high schools, only boys came back. As when we sent the male instructors there, only young boys signed up. When we sent equal 50-50 of the camp counselors, women and men, we had gender parity. So we were bringing all these girls into computers and teaching them about technology and the internet. And these girls went to university and studied math and science and computers. It has to start young. But then I watched it drop off after I became a parent. I'm wondering, where are all the women going? Because we're not advancing to managerial positions. We're not on boards. We kind of stop at entry-level and mid-level work. And, there's a whole system in place. Once you realize you're getting paid less, you have kids, you have to pay daycare. It's the choice between the man and the woman staying home. Husband generally earns more money. It becomes a financial decision that the wife stays home. And they didn't go back to work. And then there was all the things that happened post Me Too that we're hearing about now, and Time's Up, about the harassment. So, I want to encourage women to go into trades, and STEM jobs, but you got to realize that the environment isn't always friendly to you, and that's a reality. And it's really tough when you make less and you've done all this work and you've done the research, and
well, again, you have to have a healthy ego because somebody's going to call you a bitch.
Yeah, someone's.
Okay? If you are a strong woman and you're not going to take anybody's flack, somebody's going to call you a bitch, and you have to be able to look at them and say, "I'm okay with that."
Yeah, you have to have that conversation with
Call
yourself.
me anything you want because I'm not stopping till I'm making what you're making.
Well, and I see this post Me Too, and it inspires me so much because those conversations weren't happening when I worked in that environment, when I went to university. These conversations are happening now. And now as a freelancer, when I approach an employer, I say, what's your guy making? And I'm not afraid to say that because we're in a culture now where we can have that conversation about money, where women can be more strong advocates for themselves. And yeah, you might get called a bitch. I don't care. If you want my work, if you want to have a women's voice in this environment, which, yes, you need to have, thank you very much, we're half the population, you're going to pay me equally, right? And if I have more experience than the dude or anyone else on that panel or paper or whatever it is, computer science team, then you're going to pay me more. And I'm encouraged by this.
We have settled. For too long, we have settled.
Yeah. We're happy to have the work.
We're happy to have the work. And I've never had this problem. I mean...
You get paid by the word. You get paid by the show. There's no other Gail.
Well, I wasn't always famous, though. When I started out... I was determined. So I worked for a consulting company, and what happened was I topped out in an admin role. And they said the only way I could make more money was to go into sales. And so I went into sales, and I puked every day for a year before I cold called because I hated it. And I won myself some contracts, and eventually I made so much money that the partnership of the business broke up because some of them wanted to fire me and some of them wanted to keep me, and they couldn't agree because I was just making too much money.
You were making too much money.
I was making too much money.
You were too successful for the company. Well, how does that
They
even make
never,
sense?
They would never have said that to a man.
Man, no. They would call him a high performer.
They would never have said of a man working in the job I was working in, he's making too much, we got to get rid of him. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so getting back, though, then, to
what can women do?
To the woman who is
Okay.
who is basically looking at herself in this situation that, okay, I'm newly divorced. I'm this. I'm that. I think what you're talking about is be vocal for yourself.
Yes,
You're
be
responsible.
self-determining.
Yeah, you're
You
responsible
have to
for
be.
yourself.
Yes. And so you have to set up the circumstances to be responsible for yourself. I mean, I've been married multiple times, okay? I have a long trail of broken hearts behind me. And never once was I ever dependent on any of those men. And I remember when I was leaving my second husband, and the lawyer said to me, because we'd been together for a long time, but we'd only been married for about 5 years. And he said to me, well, you don't really have a claim on the house because it's only been 5 years. And I said, well, I paid him rent every month. And he said, what? I said, I wrote him a rent check every month. Now, there isn't a woman out there that I know that would do that.
Mm-mm.
Okay? But I was not going to be the girl who was being kept. First of all, he was a lot older than me, so that was one thing I had to fight against. So I paid him what I had been paying in rent on my apartment every month. But you have to be worth it. You have to decide that you're worth that kind of investment in yourself.
So be vocal for yourself. Be an advocate for yourself. Be responsible for yourself.
And most importantly, don't take anybody's shit.
Yeah.
Okay? When there is stuff being shoveled at you, pick up a shovel and shovel it right back, because that will earn you more respect than if you tuck your tail between your legs and run away.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in an office environment where you're getting harassed, bring in your cell phone and tape the conversations. I mean, women are doing this now.
Yes.
Harassment is huge. That's, pushes women out of the higher paying jobs.
So I got one final question. Have you got any comments there, Alison, or is that...
No, sorry, that was a thumbs up.
You're totally
I'm on
agreeing
cell
with that.
phones.
So here's my question then. And Gail, what you're saying is, stand up for yourself, shovel it right back, that sort of thing. So if I was in an environment where, the boss was an idiot, and, men have idiot bosses, not the way you're describing, but, so my solution was I started my own company.
Yes.
So is that something women should be thinking about?
I think more and more women are thinking about it. And I believe that we have finally gotten over the hump where women have to pull each other down to feel better about themselves, because that's been a thing for a while. Women treated each other very badly. But I believe there is now such a sense of camaraderie in terms of starting new enterprises together, using each other's skill sets to make it work, that I think that we're in a much better place now. And I encourage women that if you can't find a job that works for you, works around your family, does what you need it to do so you can have the life you want, then make yourself a job.
Which is what a freelancer is, obviously. And obviously there's pros and cons to that, I would assume.
Totally. I mean, for a long time when I was working as a consultant, every time I ended a project, I'd go into the shower and cry for an hour because I was never going to find another job, because it meant I had to get back on the phone and start cold calling again, and I hated it. But I did it. I don't like paying my GST either, but I do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems to me we live in a different world than we lived in 50 years ago, where a company meant you had to buy a lot of machinery and, big stuff and needed to raise $1 million. There are a lot of companies. We got technology now. We can do a lot of things. We can be...
But recognize that not every woman is cut out to be self-employed, okay? And so even those people that are within organizations working, talk to your co-workers, find out what everybody's making. If your company has a policy that says you don't discuss salaries, you're working for the wrong company, because that's how they keep you in the dark. So figure out what everybody is making and get yourself into a position where you are the best at what you do. When you are the best at what you do, you're really hard to fire.
Yeah, you're in demand.
I'm a big advocate of transparency in pay, and talk to your colleagues, talk to the guys, talk to the gals at your, job level and find out what they're making. And if, as Gail said, I had an HR department that said, you're not allowed to talk about your pay. And I'm like, why not? How are you going to stop me? Let's all discuss it. And we all found out that the boys made more than the girls, and we did something about it. That, all of us stuck around, but you got to talk, you got to gather the information. And yeah, not everyone's cut out to be self-employed, but you got to advocate.
Self-employment is just you have a whole bunch of other bosses. Okay, people seem to think you're going to work for yourself. You don't. You work for every single client that you have.
Yeah.
Okay,
and you got to keep them all happy.
That's right, and they can be very demanding, and they can pay late.
They pay very late.
Yes. Yeah. So you have to have all those things in place. But, if you've thought it out and you've thought to yourself, okay, this is what I really want to do. And, you do a business plan and you create a cash flow. And if all of this sounds like it's just too much hard work and you're just not prepared to put the effort in, then don't whine about your life. Shut up.
That's an excellent way to end it.
She's so full of butterflies.
I know, and happiness and everything. Ponies.
No, this is the thing. Okay, so Gail also wrote a book called CEO of Everything, which I
read it. Yes,
read it,
it's an excellent book.
And I basically cried after reading it because it's really hard to read. But I think it's such a valuable resource because all women, it's very likely you could get divorced, you could get widowed, you could just be single and choose to, have a home of your own. However you choose to live, I think there's such an empowering message in there to how to prepare, how to be the boss of your own life, how to figure it out if you don't understand it, how to deal with the emotional loss, the financial stress. It's all in there, and it's such a valuable resource. I mean, I'm still married, but I'm like, whoa, that's a disaster-proof thing I haven't thought of. I should, plug that hole.
Well, and that's what insurance is. I hope I don't ever need it, but I should be ready for it. And that's really what that book goes through.
Go get that book.
CEO of Everything.
Doug, when people don't have insurance, the thing that runs through my mind is that either you're dumb and you think God's holding you by your pom-pom, or you're selfish. Because the $90 or the $120 it will cost you from cash flow a month isn't worth the safety of your family. Come on. If I promised that I would keep your family safe for $120 a month, aren't they worth that?
Yeah, and obviously in your book, which you wrote with Victoria Rice, there's a lot more than just insurance, obviously. It's the whole mindset of, if something happens, am I ready? And it's looking forward to the future is really what it's all about. So I agree. It is an excellent resource. I will put links to that in the show notes. Any other comments from everyone? We're all good?
Yep. The last thing I would say is every one of us has the ability to be in charge of our own lives. Every single one of us has that ability. It's just a matter of whether we believe in ourselves enough.
I like that. Obviously, we all face challenges. Life is hard. We aren't all starting from the same place, but I agree with Gail. We can control whether or not we believe in ourselves. That's a great place to end the show. Thank you to Sharon Hoyes, Kerry K. Taylor, Gail Vaz-Oxlade for being here today, and thanks to Alison Petrie for letting us use the Hoyes Michaelis office here in Oshawa. That's our show for today. Full show notes, including a full transcript and links to everything we discussed today, including our study on why women are filing bankruptcy in higher numbers, and links to the book Gail wrote with Victoria Rice, CEO of Everything, can be found at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. We've got some great shows coming up. Next week, I've got an interview with a guy from a company that believes they have a solution to the problem of credit scores and credit report data hacks. And later in the month, I've got a show on how you can cheat your way to financial success. It's not what it sounds like, but it's a good one. So until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. Thanks for listening. That was Debt Free in 30.